Hello and welcome to the very first of these conversations, Missing in Action, aimed at the military community, whether it be serving or former ex, and the emergency service community as well, former or serving. And today we are joined by Rick, who's a lovely man I've met recently, based over in Canada. But Rick's going to tell us a little bit about himself, his history, and why he's the first person to be chosen to have this conversation with
me. Thanks, Paul. Why am I the first person? That's a really good question. But anyways, I'm Rick Ruppenthal. I live out in the west coast of Canada. I am I spent 30 years as a paramedic in the coast. Most of it spent in the Vancouver area in a very busy center. In that 30 years, I spent some of it on the street and some of it in the office as I rose up the ranks into becoming a superintendent, looking after a district of 200 personnel, and then eventually ended up in the latter years into education. So I was sort of involved in the educating over 3,500 paramedics across the province every year. New skills, new whatever new is, to keep their skills up to date, and their recertifications. So I'm retired now. I've taken up mentoring and coaching first responders and those in the emergency community. And I'm a family man. I've got 4 wonderful daughters and 9 grandchildren, which keeps me quite busy and involved, although COVID has really kind of put a stop to a lot of the extracurricular activities and kind of forced us to huddle into our little houses here, which has also given me an opportunity to expand and work on projects that I'm working on towards helping responders all over the world.
So you were a paramedic for an awful long time. And I know in earlier conversations we've had, you saw something quite early in your career that stopped you from being traumatized, like many of your colleagues were, by situations you went into. Can you just speak a bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is what I've just, like post-traumatic stress, which is the most popular diagnosis that's coming out right now. What I kind of realized at the end of my career, not everybody really had post-traumatic stress. Like not everybody is damaged in the service, right? And there's something about that was really intriguing to me. And because I also saw people that were not having a good time in the service, but I had a great time. There was obviously there's moments. I mean, you cannot have a day where, you were always happy, like, or always sad, because of the nature of the work, right? I mean, there's traumatic events that happen and things like that. But I found myself not as affected about it. Like, like when I say not affected, I still had emotions over it. But at the end of the day, those emotions weren't hanging on. I wasn't having what other people were having, revisiting those moments over and over and over again, like almost being stuck into it. And the only really thing that I could kind of attribute it to at that time was some earlier training that I took back in 1982. I attended a workshop that, kind of flipped me around how I viewed the world, how I viewed things, circumstances, for instance, and to me, that seemed that seemed to be the catalyst that made the change, that allowed me to view things totally different, rather than, you know, being a victim of those circumstances. They were just circumstances, and anything I added to that event or added to whatever was happening was really all on me. And so that gave me a lot of a lot of power over that, to realize that, that was really traumatic. Yes, that was traumatic. There's no doubt about it. That was traumatic. But that the suffering and anything else that comes after that is really all on me. And if I found myself, going down a rabbit hole, I knew it was me going down the rabbit hole. So it wasn't the actual work that was causing any anxiety or any of that kind of, um, symptoms. It was really my thinking about what was happening. So when I realized that and started practicing that, I was always doing better. I was always doing well. And what was really interesting throughout the work, especially when I got into the education part, was that we were starting to, and we're talking like 20 years later, 25 years later, maybe, that we started looking at intuitive thinking, intuitive approaches to doing the work. So we started really getting into buzzwords like being in the flow, being in the zone, you know, um, terms that came from professional athletes, right? That would talk about, when I'm in the zone, everything just seems to work so well, right? And we were finding that the same with paramedics, those in actual, responding fields, where we'd get into a traumatic event, and it was really high energy, and lots of things going on. And at the end, we'd have our debriefing, and we'd reflect on it. It's like, wow, how did we ever get through that? Like, it's like, that was like everything just kind of sinked in. And when we reflected back on it, it was like, yeah, we were in that zone, and it felt like no thinking. There was no thinking. The only thinking came was after the call, kind of a thing. So there was some really interesting things happening that I started to feel validated about, to what I was hearing back in '82. That science and research were starting to catch up on this whole notion that life doesn't really necessarily happen from the outside in. It happens from the inside out. We experience life through the feelings of our thinking. And i've and and to start to move our dialogue and training in that direction, I thought was just fantastic. Just fantastic. But yeah, so I attribute that as the foundation or the grounding for me to keep my mental health in check.
That's great. Absolutely amazing. So you say you're a coach now. Uh, can you speak a bit about that? A coach, a mentor?
Yeah, so one of the things I got involved in before I left, there's an organization, all the paramedic chiefs, it's called the Paramedic Chiefs of Canada, and they were looking for mentors to mentor people that were uh, up and rising executives or superintendents in the field. And so I got involved in that, and I also took up some coaching. They offered some coaching training while I was at work. So, being in the education department, I found that, as a paramedic, you can treat one patient at a time, and in the education field, you know, as you're training, you know, the potential of training more or helping more patients through the 3,000 plus paramedics just expanded. So the value of education, I thought, was like there's a lot of power in education. So um so I took coaching, and I also became a facilitator for a program that it's called Insights Canada, but it's all over the world. But so when I found myself out of work, I wanted to give back to the community, to the service that I I just loved. I just thought the career as being a paramedic was my calling. Like it was, I felt like I was meant to do that work. And maybe that's part of the reason why I thrive so much in it too. But I wanted to give back. I wanted to give more to what my understanding was, what got me through. Like we do so good with injury, right? You break your back, we've got programs. You know, we've got we've got programs for nutritional services. We got programs if you want to get fit, right? You know, we've got all these things that are offered through our organization, but we offer very little in mental health. As a matter of fact, when I took my academy training, there we never talked about it. It was never part of our training. Like everything was concentrated on protocols, on you see bleeding, this is how you stop it. If somebody's in cardiac arrest, this is what you got to do. You know, um, so you see it, you fix it, kind of a deal. But nobody ever talked about what do you do after the call? What do you do before the call? What do and communications, the softer skills. And yet, when you think of how many times you actually do the protocol when you work out the work, I would say, I don't know, 10-20% of it is protocol driven. The rest of it is how to get along with people, how to interact with patients, how to, that kind of stuff, which we don't do any training. And then of course, looking after yourself, your relationships with your family. So I felt there was a huge gap, and I felt that I could actually, offer something back to that community. And I got coached myself, and that coach basically said, it's like, well, why don't you just package that all up and just offer it back? And I did. And and life gets in the way, like you start thinking, you start going down a path, and my parents got ill, so I ended up being their sole caregiver, kind of a thing, for a couple of years. And then I got cancer, so I had to take care of myself over that. It's like, so in the last 4 or 5 years, I guess, I've been able to now focus more of my attention towards helping others, coaching, mentoring, and now developing an online course, which I hope to have a broader outreach to the community on. Basically just, this is what's helped me, and it might be very helpful to you.
Have you got examples of people have come to you and how they were when they came to you, and then their journey, if you like, and how they see life subsequently?
There's a common line of, and that's why I named my project Unbroken, because there's a common line that I'm hearing is that I am broken and I need to learn to live with my diagnosis. And I find that really troubling. I find that, first of all, it's very limiting. It sort of says, well, that's it. This is it. You've got it, and you ain't getting rid of it. Which in my experience isn't necessarily so. Now you can look at a lot of evidence out there, and this is the part that breaks my heart, because a couple of days ago we lost another police officer in our community here in Canada. Over, there's a lot of other unknown circumstances, but I do know that he suffered from post-traumatic stress. I know that at the time when he was diagnosed, he was denied a lot of benefits and a lot of support, and had to argue and push for getting help. And then, so my experience with the clients that I've been in touch with and have reached out to me, and I've reached out to them because I'm on different forums and things like that, and I hear and I see things within them, and I go, It's like, let's talk. And it's coming from that place of, I'm broken. I I I I don't like what's going on. And unfortunately, this there's a lot of suffering going on. And there's no end in sight. And the only peace of mind that seems to be apparent to them is to leave this world as the last resort. And I as much as we say it in respect, rest in peace, I I would love to live in peace. That can't be the answer. That can't be the answer. And and so I've the people that I've been able to help, and is they've had a fundamental mindset shift between, okay, so I am not broken, and they've been able to get in touch with their innate health. Because if the body itself, I mean, science proves this, right? Like, there's a thing called homostasis, where it's always trying to constantly balance itself. So if you're in chronic stress all the time, you're going out of balance. And we know that, and we know all the science around the chemistry that goes in your head, and it seems like it never ends. It's like, what you call it, the rabbit hole kind of a thing. But when you can disassociate yourself out of that for even for brief moments of time, you get the impression that there's a space of wellness there. There is a place where I can actually rest to. And it's just a question of really just getting outside of that and observing what's really going on. Not only observing, but really kind of understanding what's going on. And while I'm not doubting or saying anything wrong with the therapies out there, but even some of the leading psychologists are starting to say we need to do better. We need to be doing better. And I was at a conference one time. It was like 60 different modalities being represented. And they were all like, they were really interesting. They were all like different approaches to working with post-traumatic stress and things like that. And they all had successes. They all had stories where things were uh, were had corrected themselves, or at least appeared that way. And so it's not for everybody, like, so some therapies work and you can't be cookie cutter. And a lot of organizations just hire one and think that that's the right one to go by. Um, but what I find is that when we added coaching into the matrix, and I started to teach a little bit more about the understanding of how the mind actually works, and where our experiences are coming from, they start to really get a notion that they're more in control than what they perceived was, because they go, oh, that memory's coming back again. And that memory has a power. It feels like it has a power. And now they have the power. They are starting to throw the switch over, going, okay, yeah, my barometer's going up. I can feel that barometer going up, which is, I can understand that, I'm having anxious thoughts, and now I can do something about that. And it's been really, really powerful to see the changes, over a period of time, that people are lighter, they're happier, they're more. There's now a world of possibility, instead of this doom and gloom that keeps looming around. Like, that, do they fall back on their old sort of personal thinking habits? Yeah, but now they're not staying there for longer periods of time. Like, even myself, like I say, like I've had this kind of understanding since 1982. doesn't mean I've not had bouts of depression. I've had depression. I blew my back out halfway through my career, and was told by a doctor that I would never go back to work again. And I go back to work at a career that I just loved. It's like, you're taking my baby away, you know, and I found myself in depression. But what's interesting is that I found myself in depression and noticed that I was in depression and went, you know what, I'm freaking depressed. And just the fact that I noticed I was depressed changed that depression. It just changed. And then it became, well, what's next? And then it became, there's got to be, I'm not taking this diagnosis lying down. So I started being creative and out of basically out of my mind, as far as, like okay, so what could I do, right? And I looked at dispatch, I looked at various other things. And when I finally got around to asking, the physiotherapist, it's like, like I couldn't even walk for 5 minutes without getting pain, but I didn't understand it. And I said, so what is really going on with my back? Like, is it really broken? Is it broken? And they said, no. It's like, okay, so I feel pain. If I keep walking, am I hurting myself more? And they said, no, you're not. Okay, so I could keep walking then. Yeah, keep walking. And so I did. I kept walking, and I was in pain. But then something happened. I can't really reflect, say it happened, immediately or a few days later or whatever, but I just kept walking. And I equate that to mental health, is the fact that you might feel that you're broken, but when you start to understand more about it and where your experiences come from, and that you get that impression that, okay, I'm not broken, I can keep going. Yeah, I can keep going. There's a fundamental shift that happens, and there's a power that comes into you, and you can say, yeah, so what is next? Where can I go now on my journey, now that I've taken care of this? Yeah, you're going to take it along. Like, it's not denying that something ever happened to you, because something very real happened to you back then. But in this moment of time, right here, right now, you're not broken.
Absolutely. What boundaries have you found for accessing people coming to you and going on this journey where they establish that they aren't actually broken, but they have the ability to live again?
Yeah. Well, there's still a culture of, I guess, fear of judgment. I mean, let's face it, we all judge. We all judge. I almost feel like it's hardwired in us, and it's so hard not to. So the fact that we do judge, I think I believe that there's a fear of being judged. And there's other cultural paradigms that come in the way, right? There's the whole lot notion I grew up with, the strongest survive. I don't know if you were ever told that.
Oh, yeah.
I am not going to show my weakness. I'm going to put the shield on, and that shield is still there, with so many, and it doesn't get sort of taken away until it's sort of the last straw. I'm not gonna give up this persona until I absolutely have to, which is the sad part. And because there's a lot of suffering that goes on in between, and you hear it constantly, like in conversations with others, and the yeah, there might be a lot of things to complain about, and there might be, life isn't actually working out the way you planned it to, and all this other kind of stuff. But suffering has always been optional. So I find it still, there's a cultural thing about not reaching out. It's getting better, and I think it's getting better with more awareness. But we gotta, my ultimate dream is not to wake up and get a notice in my email that another responder decided that he couldn't wait, you know um and in the middle of still getting help, so there's something fundamentally not right. um and in organizations, including my organization, you know as I was going through, to me, I went through, I think, 3 generations. I used to look at a seniority list, and they would have the start dates of all the, and I'd see things like, oh, 1982. Oh, they've been around for a while. And I look, oh, that's their birth date. It's like, oh God, am I getting old? But, you know, like leaders would often say our greatest assets are our employees, our staff, right? And yet what they expect these people to do, stay up for 16 hours, high intensity, um, nonstop. Sometimes, in some areas, they do 24-hour shifts. Um, little rest. No breaks. As a paramedic, I never got a break. You took breaks whenever you could, right? And there was always a call holding, always a call holding. And so could we do better? Could we open it up a little bit more? Yeah. I think there's a fear. I'm not sure where it's coming from. It could be a budget thing. There could be a fear of, well, if we start recognizing that there's a problem, it's going to open up a bigger can of worms. I don't know. But my only advice is to, when you do notice, is to forget, take the persona off, take the shields off, you know, reach out. That is really the only solution, is to come forward and start talking.
You mentioned earlier your project, Unbroken Hero. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, so that started because I started hearing from colleagues and other paramedics about how they're broken, and I wanted to get that message out that you're not. So I started this Unbroken Hero project as part of my coaching services, part of educational services, to bring a different health paradigm around, rather than starting off that you are broken, that you need to be fixed. So, so we are going to treat your symptoms. Why don't we start with the fact that you're not broken, and work that way, and get you back to reminding yourself to where that is. Keep pointing to where that source is. And it's also the platform for part of the project that I'm working on now, which is the online course, because I feel, again, just like, as a paramedic, I could only deal with one person at a time. With coaching, yeah, I've done some group coaching and I've done some group workshops and things like that. But I feel that there's a need right now for something online that people could access in their own time, in the comforts of their own space. They could do it based on their schedule, right? They would always have access to the materials. They could always go back and then provide support services, either during it or after it, just to keep keep them on track, keep them on the same path, kind of thing.
Well, look, I think we've come to the end of our time. We said we'd keep it to about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And it's been amazing listening to you. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing after 30 years of service, that you're now trying to help even more, using the experience that you had and have to hopefully help a new generation. We'll put details of your website so that people can A, look up what you're doing, but B, also get in contact.
Great. I appreciate it, Paul.
Rick, thank you for being our very first guest on Missing in Action Conversations. And I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.